Okay.
So,
But he was still shelling corn,
yep,
working the farm, picking crop. I mean, doing everything.
everything.
And Gary and Dick were probably trying to help a little bit.
Yeah, they were. Gary was more involved in sports at school, where Dad needed Dick at
Yep.
that point at home, and so Dick didn't get quite as involved, and I always felt bad about that.
Right.
'Cause,
So when Grandpa married Elena, Elena brought some siblings, some of her kids. So Connie and Leslie moved in with you, or
right, and Gary, the older,
Mhm.
who is also Gary, like my
Right?
brother
Yeah.
Gary, he was married with Diana, had a
Hmm.
child, Diana, and they lived on the farm further down. Elena's husband had died when in a farm accident when she was pregnant with Leslie, and Leslie is a year younger than I am,
So she had gone
and so
15 years without.
right, and then she had four children actually after Leslie was born, and her not her oldest, but her second oldest son was killed in a tractor accident before her and Dad were married, but they were dating. And so Leslie and Connie came into the house at that point.
So then you have multiple
Seven of us.
77 of you. So
Right.
how was life with seven of you for a short time? Because Gary was probably about his way out, going to college or close to that. Probably at
Yeah,
that
he
point, but
was very close. It wasn't long.
right.
He went to Loras. It was fine. It was different. I mean, we were short bedrooms, of
Mm-hmm.
course, and it was hard because Leslie has a very strong personality, and Lena kind of had her children as her favorite, which is
Mm-hmm.
understandable. I we understood that, but Dad was very a meek, kind, humble,
Mm-hmm.
guy who didn't want to push any envelopes, and
Mm-hmm.
so would not always defend us.
Mm-hmm.
It would be like, oh my gosh, I would spend the afternoon washing the car and polishing Dad's shoes and doing all of this, and then he would come in at night from the field and he would say, and Lena would say, oh, Diana Leslie got your shoes polished.
Mm-hmm.
So it was hard. We shut our mouths a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and she was kind of verbally hard on us,
Mm-hmm.
but we didn't want to say anything because we
Right.
didn't want to hurt the situation.
Mm-hmm.
And she did a lot of good things for us. But then Leslie was a year behind me in school, and Connie was my brother Gary's age.
Yep.
So they were gone, or Gary was gone to college, and then eventually to Vietnam. But Connie stayed at home, and she worked full time, but stayed
Yeah.
on the farm.
Yeah. So let's talk about high school. So you leave Eagle, 8th grade. You go down.
Mhm.
You went to Don Bosco. So what was high school life like in 1962? Starting as a freshman, sophomore, junior.
I was pretty shy. That I know that might be hard to believe, but I was pretty shy, and went in with good Eagle Center friends, and made some other really good friends.
So other kids were coming from where other? Obviously from Gilbertville, but were there other like Laporte? I guess what were other?
Laporte, Jessup, Raymond.
Okay.
Gilbertville, and Eagle Center.
Okay. So how many were in your graduating class or your class?
We think we had 86
Okay.
or something like that, or 85 or 86. We had a tight class. We still do.
Mhm.
We're very. I mean, if something happened tomorrow, we would have classmates flying in from Texas and California to be here for our classmates, because most of us are pretty tight.
So you're quiet.
Yeah.
Back in that time, there were no opportunities for you to be involved in sports, was there?
No, there wasn't, and I didn't make cheerleader.
So that was the only option. That was the only option was cheerleading.
In choir.
In choir.
And plays,
Okay.
and I was in a play. Can't remember. I was Mrs. Beasley. I can't remember the name of the play, but
so
just a small part. I did speech.
Right. So
Also
let's
did
say
speech.
that you think of all the opportunities our kids have now to be involved in sports. What sports do you think you would have played in high school if you had
Oh,
all these opportunities now? Would you have played them all?
oh,
Or
I would have played basketball and softball for sure.
volleyball?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I would
Okay.
probably would have tried everything, but I know the kids tease me now that I play catch, and they go, well, "You kind of have a noodle arm," and I said, "That's because I didn't have a chance to play." What? Yeah, I really think I
Yeah.
would have.
Was there a uniform at Bosco back then?
Yes, we had a kind of a strict uniform. We had a principal who was a nun, and we had the ugliest skirts in the world, and they were kind of an icky blue, and they were heavy, and you could not wear them above or below your or above your knees. So if she thought they were above your knees and you'd be walking down the hall on the right side, she would say, girl, come here," and she would make you kneel down on the floor, and if it didn't touch the floor. But most of us just rolled them up, so all we had to do was unroll them, and we had to wear white blouses with Peter Pan collar, no jewelry, and then we had a bolero kind of thing, a kind of jacket kind of thing that we could wear also with our uniforms. They were ugly, and when I graduated as a senior, I had a bunch of friends over, and we had a bonfire and we burned.
Any other memories of high school?
Oh, I think I had fun. I wasn't in with the crowd that I think just ran, rampant all the time. But I got invited to most of the parties.
So
Had a
what was
few
it? What
dates.
was the parties like in the '60s in rural Iowa?
We played Leslie Gore, and we had the radio or the record machine on, and I don't remember dancing, but just mingling.
Not in the back 40 with
No.
or
Well, we did have a couple of hay rides,
Yeah.
but there was always parent supervision. But
Okay.
I did, as a sophomore, date who was a really, really good friend. Him and his wife are really good friends. They married also from our class together. John Bagby. I dated John for about a year, and he was older and retained, so he could drive, and he would come and pick me up in an old Studebaker, and I just kept thinking, there's got to be more out there for me. So I decided to break up with him. I broke up with him, and he had Ann, who has been married to him for 50 years now. We started dating Ann, and I was kind of sitting there like, what? I didn't date a lot.
Right.
And the only way I got with Jim was one of my best friends is Janice Rocher, who was grandpa's dad's first cousin, and senior prom came. I did have a date my junior year, but for prom, and she talked Jim into asking me to prom, and we kind of hit it off, and we had fun. And we double dated with Janice, his cousin, and my friend, and my first cousin, Alan Jones, and had a great time. And then Jim never really wanted to call me again because he thought his mom wanted him to be a priest. So I kind of used that.
When did you start to drive?
I took driver's
Did you drive like on the farm? Did you drive, the trucks and everything like that, and the tractors? And did you get to do all that?
I always drove from probably 6th, 7th grade on. I drove the haymow where you pulled the rope back and it lifted the hay up. And then they would say, dump it, and you would stop and it would dump it. They would pull a rope and it would dump it into the haymow, and then I'd drive the tractor up. You'd take the same path back and forth. Dad took me out with a car out into the field and would set up 2 bales of hay and have me parallel park and practice parallel parking. Before I could get my driver's license, we did at that time, it was very beginning of driver's ed. I was one of the first ones to take driver's ed. I had to go to Don Bosco, drive to Gilbertville to take driver's ed, and my first cousin taught it, Joe Stabell.
Oh.
And so I took driver's ed, and I passed, and
So how old were you? Was it 16? Was it
16?
16. Okay. So obviously, I'm sure Grandpa didn't have a car waiting for you, did he?
No. And Gary, of course, uh, was gone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we had, I don't remember really if I got to
Mm-hmm.
drive very much.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would drive sometimes. I remember we would go to LaPorte.
Remember the cars you guys had, or?
I remember at one point we had a 48, which was the year I was born, but
Mm-hmm.
I was like 5, 6 years old. Dad always bought Oldsmobiles.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really remember what I drove, but I remember taking the Siebel girls, and on Saturday nights we'd go to LaPorte at a street dance, and then they would get asked home, and I could never have anybody bring me home because I had the car. They always talked me into driving. I do remember that.
That's true.
But no, I don't remember a lot about
Mhm.
drive. And we
Yeah.
always took the bus to Giverville.
And did you take the bus then to school at Eagle too? Was that
We
a
would
bus?
drive to Eagle.
Okay.
And we would take turns, like the Bovies would
Okay.
take turns, and I would,
Okay.
we'd just take turns getting everybody down there,
Mhm.
and then we would take the bus from there. But
So-
I do remember one time though, when I was in 8th grade, eighth graders got to go down into the basement of the old Eagle Center School because we were more mature.
Mhm.
And before the buses came from the high school, we would go down and we got to turn on music and we could dance and stuff. And I remember, and it was a big thing when they saw the bus coming over that hill, they would yell, "Bus is coming, bus is coming." So everybody cleared out. So I remember Larry Mullen and Alan Jones and Linda Siebel and myself. It was right on the ground.
Mhm.
And so we just opened the window and climbed out the window. No screens or anything,
Mhm.
of course. And we just climbed out the window, and a nun was And so we had to write 200 times, "I will not climb out windows. Only criminals do such things." 200 times. And that was a night that after Mom had died. And so we
Oh.
were going over to Mullins that night, and Larry had to write it too. So we sat there the whole time. I remember that, just the verbiage on it. Just,
So when did you start thinking about college and then what you wanted to do? At some point, you ended up going to college, but when did that process start, or how did you decide, and how did you know you wanted to be a teacher?
there wasn't a lot of options. Let me tell you that. At about a Southbourne high school, you had to decide whether you're going to go into the secretarial route
Mhm.
at high school to take classes,
Mhm.
or you're going to go into the college prep classes. Well, I knew I couldn't be a nurse. I can't do the blood thing. I could be a nun, and I really didn't think that was going to work for me. And teaching. I mean, there wasn't a lot of options that we were given in counseling or anything. And I really thought teaching would be the right step for me. And so I took started college prep as a junior, and then really just had teaching in the back of my head. And once I got into college, I knew that's what I wanted to do.
Mhm.
I knew I wasn't going to change on it.
Right.
And so that's kind of a decision making. I don't remember talking to Dad or Lena about it. They had never been to college. They didn't understand why I wanted to go to college.
Why did you choose UNI? Because Gary had gone to Loris, so that was definitely an option, or things that I'm sure they were talking about at school. But why UNI?
It's a teaching. At that time, it was State College of Iowa, which was a teaching college, and it was Iowa teaching IT. Iowa teaching college in IT as it was ITS.
Iowa Teachers College of Iowa.
That's what it.
Yep.
Yeah, and it was that, and it was supposed. It was a great place for teachers. And then I was there a year, and of course bought a couple sweatshirts with that on it. And then it turned to SCI, and bought a couple with that. And then before I was, and eventually changed into UNI. But no, I was, once I got there and started the classes in there. But I think UNI, because it was a teaching school, and it was the price was right, and I didn't want to live at home. I knew that at that point in my life. I knew that wasn't going to be a good situation for me. But yet I wanted to be close to Jen and Annette to help and Dick, they needed support.
Right. So, so you went to prom with Dad. Your senior year. What? Anything after that?
I think that summer after that, before we went to college, we
Hmm.
were at a dance at the Electric Park, and a whole bunch of it. He didn't hardly talk to me all night. And I don't know, this is not going anywhere. But he came over one of the last couple dances and wanted to take me home, and he took me home. And then after that, um, I just remember dating people in college and going out with guys and thinking, it's just not a Jim Christopher. That sounds
Hmm.
really corny, doesn't it?
So you both went your separate ways after that. You weren't officially dating or anything
Oh,
like
didn't
that. So,
even see each other until I had a really good friend we graduated with, Steve Rettinghouse, and Steve and I were good friends, and he was at UNI, and he would invite me and my friends over to
hmm
their parties on their
hmm
floor, and I even went. I think it was my freshman sophomore year. I went to one of the dances or one of the formals with him,
hmm
and we'd go out and we'd have fun. I mean, we'd go to a movie or we'd just hang out on the hill or something. We weren't really dating.
hmm
I mean, it wasn't. I didn't feel
hmm
that relationship with him, and he was good friends with Alan Jones and Jim, and so he went to Loris one weekend to spend with them, and he told Jim, he said, well, she's lost a little weight. And she said, gosh, she's fun. I said, you should call her. So he wrote me a letter, and we got together that sophomore year at Christmas.
hmm
We met at Don Bosco for a game,
hmm
basketball game, and went to town to Waterloo afterwards to Hong Kong and ate. And he drove me back to Bosco, and then we just started writing each other and seeing each other, and knew we were kind of meant for each other, but we decided maybe we should, continue. We were Dubuque and Cedar Falls, continue dating other people
hmm
to make sure. And so I would date a few people, and he would date and then would write, and oh my God, this guy was a jerk,
hmm
something. And finally, by junior year, we knew we would eventually be married, but it was hard. I mean, it was a long
Right.
distance relationship. It wasn't like he had a car and they had to hitchhike home, him and Alan, if they
hmm
wanted to come home. And
So, tell me about life at UNI. Where'd you live? Who'd you live with? Um,
okay.
some good memories
I
from.
started in Lothar Hall with a friend from high school, Rita Bennick, who is a dear friend
Hmm
still. And her and I were going to room together, and we got a third roommate, Kathy Palmer, who was from Makokata. And so she was rather different. But the three of us lived together, but we were hanging out with another good friend from high school, Phyllis Shares, and she was rooming with Vera Friedman, who the four of us started hanging out. Rita
hmm
and I and Phyllis and Vera, and we did everything together. We really did. And so the second year, we decided that we'd flip up roommates. And so Vera and I lived together, and Phyllis and Rita lived together, and we had a double.
hmm
And Vera and I were, we were, all four of us were just
hmm
really tight. And Vera and I just were good together.
hmm
And so we lived together our junior year, moved over to, we talked about getting an apartment. And so we were looking at apartments with somebody else, and we ended up like for maybe a semester in an apartment, the four of us with a couple other
hmm
gals, and then we moved to Norin for a year, and we were in Norin, and that summer between junior and senior year, Vera had a really bad car accident and broke her pelvic, and she couldn't come back to school. So I ended up rooming, I can't even remember who I was rooming with, but I was in Norn.
Oh.
And then I graduated, and then she had to come back and finish. But we still see Vera and her husband Dave live in Clinton, and they're really, really good friends.
hmm
So
Okay.
at school, I don't know. I did classes and just the normal go to things and hang out at Commons. At that time, we didn't have the union.
Right. You didn't obviously. Grandpa and Elena could not help you financially. So how did you get through school?
When I went, Dad, they gave me $500, and I don't know how they did that because Jan and Annette keep saying, "I'm gonna," but they gave me $500, which helped my first semester, and then I started almost immediately. They did let me take a car that was about on its last leg. It was a Comet, and I called it the Wonder Bus, and had to. I started working at the Holiday Inn at a restaurant right in front. Is kind of like a coffee house in front of the Holiday Inn, and I worked there. I worked 2 nights, overnights, like 10 to 8 or 10 to 6 or whatever it was, 6 I think it was, 2 nights a week in the middle of the week, and then I'd work weekends. A lot of times I would get the day shift on the weekends, and that between the salary and the tips got me through. And the car, I'd go out in the winter in the lot, and it would start, and I'd call Dad crying, and so eventually he said, "Well, let's go get another car." So he took me to get another car, but I had to buy it. So, but that helped me get through it. And when I graduated, I had loans that I eventually paid off.
You had, when you turned 21, I hear there was a little incident with the police or something like that. You want to share that little story?
Sure. I was with Rita and Vera and Phyllis and I, and 21st birthday. I think I was one of the first ones to turn. I know Rita was, and so I drove, and we were going to go to the Panther Inn or Panther
Lounge. I think it's the
Lounge.
Panther Lounge. Yep.
Yeah, I think it's still there.
Yeah,
right?
it's still there. Yep.
And we went there. We went another place downtown. Maybe it was there was a place we used to go on the hill. Oh gosh, Vera would kill me. I can't say the name of it. It was a dance place and stuff. And we went there, and then we went to the Panther Inn. And we decided, because I was driving, that we better go back. So in those days, like in Lothar, you had to, no, it was in, we were going back to Lothar for some reason. Anyway, there was a lady that was on guard and sitting in a room as you came in, and you had to sign in, and you had to be in by a certain time. And she was there to make sure you were okay. But we decided we're going to smuggle in a 6-pack of beer for like 4 or 5 of us. And one of these gals was, I can't remember her name, but she was a big gal, blonde. She had somebody's stolen ID, and it didn't look like her at all. And Rita was definitely underage. Phyllis and Vera were, because their birthday's June. So anyway, I stopped downtown Cedar Falls and went into a bar, because you didn't buy, you couldn't go to a Casey's and buy beer. So I went into a bar and I bought I think it was a 6-pack. It couldn't have been more than a 6-pack. And they put it in a brown paper bag, and I walked right out on the parkade, got into the car, started back off, and I say, "This policeman." And I just back out and take my time, and I go all the way around. I go down by the ice
house,
and that way. I was taking that way back to the campus, and I was so careful. I was just being so careful. Got like within, I don't know, a couple blocks of where we were going to park, and the light comes on. He followed us the whole time. The light comes on, and so I said, "Okay, just don't try to hide it." He watched me come out with this. And so he comes up to the car, and I give him my license, and he said, "Oh, happy birthday." And I said, "Oh, thank you." And he said, "Where are you going?" I said, "Well, we're going back to the dorm." He said, "That's a good thing. That's a good thing. That's good." And he said, just go, be safe and go back. And he said, "And have a happy birthday." So we went back.
I thought he said something about turn on your lights.
Oh, turn on my lights.
Yes, I thought that was part of
the.
Yeah, you stopped. You could turn on your lights. So
because it was so bright downtown in Cedar Falls, and I was so nervous. I didn't turn my lights on. He said, "Would you do me a favor?" And I said, "Yes." what can I do? And he said, well, have a happy birthday and turn on your lights. Thank you for remembering that story.
That's why I'm here.
That's why you're here. Okay.
So it's 1970, and
I
you and
graduated.
Dad are pretty serious, talking marriage. So tell me
Well-
about that process, or
In the meantime, Jim went to National Guards.
Mhm.
And so he was gone my senior year. He was gone for 6 months. And I did my student teaching in Cedar Rapids. And a good friend of mine from college, Deb Richards, her mom lived in Cedar Rapids, had a room, Deb's room upstairs. And she said, why don't you come live with me? And so I lived with Deb's mom. And
what school in Cedar
um,
Rapids?
I went to Eisenhower,
Okay.
and I loved it. It was a great school. They
Public.
offered
It was a public school.
public school. And so
They offered you a job.
they offered me a job, yeah. And eventually,
Yeah.
No, I went to, I'm sorry, it was Cedar Rapids.
Mhm.
And it was, I didn't even remember the name of the school in Cedar Rapids, but it was close to where Deb's mom
Mhm.
lived. And it was winter as well. It was
Yep.
the last semester anyway. And I had a great teacher. It was second grade. In those days, you just did one
Mhm.
level. I really, really liked her. And Jim was in the reserve and he was in Missouri. And so I finished, and I would drive back and forth sometimes on the weekend and to the folks. And then when I graduated, he was done and he had come home, and I was just getting home from college, and I was in the house with the folks, and Jim came over to visit, and he drove in the yard, and Gary's down washing his car down by the barn, and so I came out to say hi, and I was kind of waving at him. He goes, look in the car in the glove compartment. There's your present for graduation. So I go in, and there's a ring, and I'm going, this is really nice. He's down here with Gary, like across the whole yard. And so I took it in the house and showed the folks.
Mhm.
I mean, we had talked about it. We
Right.
knew we were going to get married. And
So this is May of 1970.
May of
I
1970.
didn't get down my knee
Right,
at doing
yeah.
May of 1970. And so I went down and showed Gary. And then we started talking about what we were going to do because he had to be in Dubuque.
Mhm.
I was offered a job in Cedar Rapids. But I was also offered a job in Dubuque.
Okay.
And he wanted to wait until he graduated. I said, that's ridiculous because I'll take the job in Dubuque at Eisenhower.
Mhm.
And then you can finish school, and why pay, dorm rent
Mhm.
when we can live together,
Mhm.
and it'd save us money, and
Mhm.
we don't have to wait. And so we decided to get married. This is in May, the end of May.
Mhm.
We got married in November, the end of November. And we found a cute little apartment, and I lived there, and he lived in the dorm. And so we got married the
Mhm.
end of November. And then.
So
we lived in
any
his-
wedding showers, anything like that?
Yeah.
Any fun stuff like that you remember?
They always have a big one at Eagle Center,
Okay.
where everybody's
Mhm.
invited and all the old ladies come. And my friends, this Mickey Seidel at the time, it's Mickey Phillips now. She gave me a shower, and some of my high school friends came,
Mhm.
and it was like negligees and stuff
Mhm.
like that. And I was actually just not too long ago, I was saying to Mickey, I said, do you remember that? And she goes, I don't know. And I said, I remember what you gave me. And it was like this little teddy thing. And I said, oh, and it was so cute and so pretty. And I said, that is so neat. And I remember it. And she goes, I also remember what you said when I opened it. She said, well, you won't have that thing on long. And she just laughed. She didn't remember that. No, I had that shower. And Jim's mom's relatives gave me a shower in LaPorte.
Okay. So you what grade at Eisenhower? What were you teaching? Do you remember?
I taught second grade.
Okay.
Mr. Smith was principal, and it was a pod. They
Yep.
would split into pods, and I really, really, really liked it there. But we didn't stay then because I had you in September, and Jim was, pretty
So
much.
you got married in November,
In
and
November.
then honeymoon.
We went to on the way out of town. We went by Vic's Bar.
Mhm.
And there we saw all of our friends' cars were there, but of course, Jim didn't want to stop. So we got as far as New Hampton and we stayed overnight. And then we went into Rochester and we spent a night and we didn't do anything. I mean, outside of the room, we didn't go see anything. It was November. It was icky. I remember we went out and got Kentucky Fried Chicken and watched movies. And then the next morning, Sunday morning, we got up. We got married on a Friday night. Got back because I had to teach on Monday and he had to go to school.
So let's talk about the wedding a little bit. Where'd you get your dress? What was your colors? Remember any of that stuff? Yeah.
I got my dress downtown Waterloo. I can't remember the name of it, where it was at, but New York. I think New York something. New York something. Anyway, I got my dress there, and I had a putrid green, kind of like a khaki green or a army green for my colors. What makes me feel really, really bad about our wedding is because we decided to get married. Well, Jim's brother, Tom, was not there. He was in the Army Reserve, so he could not come home for it. And my brother Dick was in Vietnam, so he couldn't be there. But I had my Vera, of course, in the wedding, and then Leslie and Jan. And Darla Olson was my little flower girl. Jim had a good friend of his that he was in the reserves with, and Alan, best man, and Gary, my brother, and another guy were ushers. And, it was Friday night at 7:00. It was raining. It was awful weather. We got, in those days, you didn't have pictures before. We got to the church and we had a phone call at the rectory that the photographer from Hudson was not going to be able to make it because his wife was having a 7th baby. And so we just went ahead with the wedding. I mean, what do? You got people there. So we went with the wedding and he didn't make it. At the end of the wedding, he came. So everybody, we didn't have a dance, which I regret. We went to Larry's. We had a meal at Larry's in LaPorte.
Yeah, that was pretty much.
And no dance. And but we had to stay afterwards to take pictures. And so everybody was at our reception. And I remember they had Dad walk me down the aisle, and there's absolutely nobody in the pews. And the one thing about our wedding is that I was very nervous, and your back was to the people, and we were kneeling, and the whole wedding I was just real nervous. We did our vows and everything, and at communion, people were coming up for communion, and Jim looked at me and he said, "Ooh, did you get a new dress?"
So it kind of broke the ice.
Broke the ice, and that was a little more comfortable, I guess. So, but yeah, it wasn't because I didn't.
Right.
I just was nervous.
So you finish the school year. You find out you're pregnant right away. So you finish out the school year and you continue teaching because I'm doing August. So you decide not to
go back.
Not to go back.
Well, and Jim was going to graduate. We didn't know where he was going, and for me to sign a contract, and in those days, that's what we did. We just stayed home, and as much as I liked teaching in the school I was at, and then he ended up that summer got a job in Rock Island, or Davenport, Rock Island area, Davenport, and so we just went there.
So where did we live in Dubuque? What do you remember about where we lived? And
it was a nice little apartment. It had 1 bedroom, a little kitchen, and a little living room. But it was nice. It was fairly newer. It wasn't like an old place. And so we lived there, and Alan would come over all the time because Alan just wanted to get out of the dorm. So he was over there most nights. We spend about $20 a week on groceries, and then we treated ourselves on Friday night. We'd go down to Chicken Delight and get a small pizza.